He fired her like she meant nothing. Just the maid. Just the help. A one-time mistake. And yet when he returned, broke, betrayed, and begging for a second chance, he didn't walk into his company. He walked into hers. His name was gone from the glass. And hers? Etched in steel. This is not a story about revenge through violence. It's a story about quiet rise, earned respect, and a woman who let the world think she was disposable, until she owned everything they said she'd never touch. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone has ever dismissed you, ignored your worth, or treated you like you didn't belong in the room, stay with us, because this story might be your story too. Welcome to Mr. Charles Stories, where American storytelling meets emotional power, hard lessons, and unforgettable outcomes. If this story grabs you already, tap like to help us reach more people, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop a comment. I've been there if someone's ever counted you out. Let's begin. Elena Drix wasn't the kind of woman who made noise. She didn't chase attention, didn't raise her voice, and never asked for anything she hadn't already earned. At 2007, she worked as a maid in the estate of one of America's youngest tech billionaires, Malric Vane, the man behind Vane Tech Holdings. Her days were long. Her tasks were quiet. She knew the sound of imported Italian tile under her shoes better than her own voice. She scrubbed staircases that led to parties she wasn't allowed to see. She folded monogram towels for guests who never learned her name. And every morning, she left a hot mug of espresso outside the frosted glass door of Malric Vane's home office. She never knocked, never peeked in. He never said thank you. In fact, he never said anything until the blackout. That night would change everything. Not immediately, but enough to light the match. And every empire begins with a match someone didn't see coming. Let's tell the story of the maid who became the CEO, and the man who had to beg for the floor he once ruled. Are you ready? Let's go. The marble in the Ashmere estate didn't echo like most mansions. It absorbed sound, which made it perfect for someone like her. Elena Drix knew how to move in silence. 5 years into her position, she could clean a chandelier without a single clink, fold monogram towels into perfect thirds without creasing the emblem, and slip out of a room before anyone noticed she'd been there. That was her role. That was her survival. Malric Vane didn't hire her directly. Billionaires didn't waste time on details like that. His assistant had passed her resume through 2 layers of interviews before the agency placed her at the estate. She was told, "You're to clean, restock, and vanish. No unnecessary conversation, no eye contact." So, she didn't speak until the power outage. It was early spring. A storm rolled in from the Hudson and shut down most of the county, taking the mansion's electricity with it. The generators had kicked in, but only partially. One wing stayed dark. Elena had been in the kitchen when it happened, restocking the fruit basket. By hand, when the lights snapped off and the silence turned heavier. She grabbed a match and started lighting the thick wax candles mounted along the counters. She didn't expect him to walk in. Malric Vane was rarely ever home, and if he was, it was late, or loud, or both. But that night, he stepped into the dim kitchen with his sleeves rolled up and a tablet in his hand, grumbling about failing signals and dropped investors. He looked up, paused. "You lit these?" he asked, gesturing toward the candles. Elena nodded. "Yes, sir." His eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to anyone answering plainly. Most people danced around him, always saying too much. "What's your name?" he asked. It startled her. In 5 years, he hadn't asked once. "Elena," she said. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. She wasn't dressed to impress. No makeup, no polish, just her usual black button-up and apron. "Pretty name," he said, before walking past her and disappearing into the next room. She didn't expect to hear from him again. But she did, the very next morning. At 8:15 a.m., his assistant approached her with a quiet look of confusion. "Mr. Vane requested you bring his coffee today," she said. Elena blinked. "Me? Yes. Specifically you." She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. She just brewed the espresso like she always did, one shot, cinnamon edge, no sugar, and placed it on the tray. When she entered his study for the first time in 5 years, it was like walking into a different world. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline like a portrait. 2 minimalist desks sat opposite each other with nothing on them, but wireless screens, tablets, and a single leather-bound notepad. Malric stood in front of the window in a grey shirt with no tie, phone pressed to his ear. He didn't turn around. He just held up a hand to signal silence and gestured for her to set it down. She did, and turned to leave. But as she reached the door, he said, "Elena, right?" She froze. "Yes, sir. That's all. Thank you." The requests came slowly after that. Nothing inappropriate, nothing obvious, but intentional. He asked for her to start overseeing the pantry reordering, then the laundry scheduling, then the wine selections for guest events. It was never much, but it was more than he gave to anyone else on staff. Once she passed him in the hallway and he said, "Morning," before anyone else could speak. It felt strange. She didn't smile, didn't respond. She wasn't sure it was safe to. But she noticed his eyes lingered longer than before, not with lust, but with curiosity, like he was still trying to figure out what he had missed all those years she'd gone unseen. 2 weeks later, she was finishing her routine in the library, dusting shelves. He hadn't touched in months, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. It was him. He wasn't on the phone. He wasn't distracted. He looked different, looser. "Do you drink wine?" he asked. She hesitated. "Sometimes." He walked to the cart in the corner and pulled out 2 glasses. No tray, no assistant, just him. Without asking permission, he poured both glasses and handed her one. She didn't take it. "I'm still on shift, sir." He smiled faintly. "This place never stops running. I think that makes us both always on shift." Reluctantly, she accepted the glass. They stood near the window, the city glowing far below. He didn't ask about her past. He didn't offer details about his. He simply said, "You've been quiet today." She stayed silent. "You're always quiet," he added, then looked at her. Something about the way he said it made her want to speak, but she didn't. He raised his glass. To silence then. They clinked gently, and drank. She didn't remember falling asleep. But when she opened her eyes hours later, the library was dim. Her neck was stiff, and a thin blanket had been draped over her shoulders. He was gone. The wine glasses were gone too, but the candles still flickered low beside the bookshelf. The next morning, she came in early, prepared to apologize for the moment, whatever it was. But there was no message, no punishment, just his usual coffee request. Except this time, when she delivered it, he said, "You don't have to knock anymore." She didn't know how to feel about that, but it changed everything. Elena didn't change her routine, even after the wine, even after the blanket, even after being told she didn't need to knock. She still entered quietly, still left his espresso on the edge of his desk, still tucked her apron strings twice before turning away. But Malric changed, not dramatically, but noticeably. He began watching her. She could feel it. When she passed him by the hallway staircase, when she was arranging books in the east parlor, when she moved through the kitchen during late-night service. Once she heard him correct a guest who referred to her as the maid. "She runs the house," he said plainly. It wasn't a compliment. It was a shift, a warning, a signal that she was no longer just a uniform in the background. Still, he never touched her. He never crossed the line. He didn't need to. Power can flirt without words, and his presence carried more weight than any hand could. It was late summer when it happened. Humidity thickened the air. The estate's HVAC system hummed constantly, but the walls still sweated. Elena was closing up the study that night. She always dusted the chessboard last. No one played chess in that house, not even the guests. But Malric liked the aesthetic. Black marble and white stone, a frozen war in the middle of a sterile room. She wiped the board gently, straightened the bishops. Then she heard him enter. He wasn't in a suit, just slacks and a dark shirt, sleeves casually rolled to his elbows. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked undone. "Wine?" he asked, already reaching for the cabinet. She turned to leave. "I should go." "Stay," he said. Not as a command, just a quiet ask. She paused and stayed. He poured 2 glasses. This time, she took it without hesitation. He didn't talk much. He sat on the opposite end of the leather couch and stared into the city lights. "I spent 10 years building something I might not even like anymore," he said finally. She didn't reply. He glanced at her. "That doesn't surprise you?" "No." "Why not?" "Because no one who values silence ever talks about how loud it gets at the top." He blinked, then laughed. Genuinely. It startled her. "You always speak like that." She shrugged. "Only when asked." The conversation moved slowly, dripped, like the wine. He asked where she was from. She answered simply, "Culver Creek." Outside Savannah, he asked if she had family. Not anymore. She asked nothing about him, and that seemed to fascinate him more. "You're not curious?" he asked. "No," she said. "I think people say too much when they believe their name protects them." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Elena, do you know how many people in my life actually tell me the truth?" She stared at him. "None." "That's why you're talking to the maid." That silenced him, but it didn't end the moment. She stood eventually, said good night. He didn't stop her, but he followed her with his eyes as she walked toward the door. Just as she touched the handle, he said, "Would it be terrible if I asked you to stay a little longer?" She paused. The hallway behind that door led to her safe world, her clear boundaries. But something about the way he asked, soft, not hungry, made her hesitate. She turned back, slowly. "I don't want trouble." He nodded. "Me either." And yet, she stayed. They talked for hours. She sat on the rug beside the bookshelf, while he lay on the couch, with his arm flung over his eyes. They didn't touch. Not then. Not yet. But something shifted. It wasn't love. It wasn't lust either. It was 2 exhausted people, sharing space without pretending to be more or less than they were. Lonely, tired, cynical, but still breathing, still needing, still human. The next day, nothing was said. No messages. No changes in her assignments. Just silence, but the kind that pressed against her ribs. Days passed. Then, a week. He didn't reach out again. Didn't request coffee. Didn't ask for her by name. She thought maybe it was over. A lapse in judgment on his part. An embarrassment he'd chosen to erase. Until the night he returned from a trip to Zurich with a beautiful woman on his arm. His fiancée. The house staff whispered. Elena didn't. She just kept her hands busy. But her stomach turned. Not because of the woman. Because of what was growing inside her. She found out she was pregnant 4 days later. Alone. In a clinic that smelled like lemon bleach and plastic chairs. The doctor congratulated her. She didn't respond. She stared at the wall and thought about wine glasses and quiet laughter and a couch that never made a sound. She thought about Malric, and then forced herself to stop. 2 weeks later, she was called into HR. A brief meeting. Polite. Professional. They handed her a check and said her services were no longer needed. Why? The woman glanced nervously at the paper in her hand. "I'm just following orders." This came from the top. No warning. No discussion. Just a check. And silence. As she walked out of the mansion for the last time, Elena didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't even look back. She just pressed her hand to her stomach and whispered the only promise she would keep for the next 5 years. "They'll remember my name." It didn't hit her right away. When Elena walked out of Ashmere Estate with the check folded neatly into her handbag, she still felt numb. Her shoes crunched lightly on the gravel driveway. The sun was too bright, the wind too calm. She didn't know where to go. The mansion had been her home for 5 years. Her room was small, tucked behind the laundry corridor, but it had a bed, a working heater, and a cracked window that caught the sunrise each morning. Now it wasn't hers. No warning, no box of belongings, just a severance envelope and silence. No one spoke to her as she left. Not even the head butler, who used to hand her extra bread when the chef made too much. They had all heard the rumor, the maid and the master, and now she was gone. Elena didn't go to the train station. She walked 4 blocks and took a cab to Eastway, an old neighborhood, where one of the former cooks, Mira, still lived with her sister. Mira opened the door before she knocked. Oh God, Lena. Elena stood there, expression blank, the breeze tugging at her coat sleeves. I don't need much space, she said. Just a few weeks. Mira pulled her in before she finished the sentence. She tried to keep busy. She cleaned Mira's apartment every day, even when Mira begged her not to. She organized the pantry alphabetically, repaired a torn curtain, filed Mira's receipts into folders. By day 5, she realized it wasn't distraction, it was survival. Because every time she sat still, her hand would drift to her stomach, and her thoughts would spiral. How do you raise a child when you don't even have a place to live? She started applying for jobs the following week. Housekeeping, office cleaning, night shifts, day shifts, anything. But every interview ended the same way. We'll let you know. And then, nothing. By the 3rd rejection, Mira sat her down. They're not saying it, but word got around. The Ashmere staff talk. You were let go for being too close. Elena's face tightened. I didn't ask for anything. I know, Mira said gently. But this city doesn't care. She stopped applying after rejection number 8. Her bank account showed just under $1,200, and her body felt heavier by the day. At 6 months pregnant, she wasn't just fighting to stay afloat. She was trying not to drown. Then came the flyer. Mira had brought it home from the community center bulletin board. Cleaning help needed, co-work hub, Midtown. The pay was low, but the hours were flexible, and no one asked questions. Elena took it the next morning. The Midtown startup hub wasn't glamorous. It smelled like cheap instant coffee, old printer ink, and beanbags that hadn't been washed since 2018. But it was clean enough, loud, anonymous, full of kids in hoodies yelling into headphones about algorithms and funding rounds. She liked it instantly. No one noticed her. She could glide through glass doors with her cart and mop without being stopped, questioned, or whispered about. She was invisible again, but this time it was freedom, not shame. On her 3rd week, something strange happened. She was assigned to clean a boardroom that hadn't been used in days. It was filled with whiteboards, open pizza boxes, dry markers, and tech jargon scribbled in every direction. She cleaned slowly. She liked reading the boards. Most of it didn't make sense, but numbers always did. And there, in the middle of a messy pricing model, was a decimal in the wrong place. A simple error, but a big one. The projections were wrong by hundreds of thousands. She looked around. No one was coming. She picked up a Sharpie and quietly made the correction. She didn't expect it to matter. She left, cleaned the restrooms, went home. The next morning, a man in a blue hoodie approached her by the elevator. You the one who fixed our board yesterday? Elena froze. I don't know what you mean. He held up his phone, photo of the whiteboard. You wrote this. I checked the camera. You corrected the revenue column. She stayed silent. He didn't look angry. He looked impressed. Do you have a finance background? She hesitated. A scholarship. Accounting. I didn't finish. Why not? Life happened. He looked at her differently now, like she'd been hiding something valuable in plain sight. You looking for more hours? She nodded slowly. Come in early tomorrow. Let's talk. That was the first yes she'd heard in months, and she almost didn't believe it. But the next morning, at 7:45 a.m., she walked into that boardroom again. This time, without a mop. She didn't expect the boardroom to be warm. But that morning, it felt like the lights hummed differently. The man in the hoodie, his name was Vic, was already there. 2 others sat at the long table with laptops open and coffee in hand. Young, loud, talking in acronyms. Vic stood and waved her over. This is Elena. he said. "The one who fixed our burn rate." The guys gave quick, polite nods, then returned to their screens. She felt out of place in her pressed black blouse and flats. "Here's what I'm thinking," Vic said, pulling out a chair. "We need help organizing our back-end ops. It's a mess. The last guy quit mid-week." Elena sat slowly. "I've never worked in a startup before," she said. Vic leaned in, smiling. "That's fine. What I care about is detail. I looked through your correction. It wasn't just the decimal. You fixed the entire margin chain." She swallowed. "I used to love balance sheets. What happened?" "Life." He didn't pry. Instead, he opened a laptop and said, "Let me show you what we're working with. You tell me what makes sense and what's broken." It wasn't a test, but it felt like one. For the next 45 minutes, she listened, asked 3 questions, and rewrote a portion of their expense flow. They all stared at her after that. "That's cleaner than our accountant's model," one muttered. Vic nodded slowly. "I'll offer you part-time for now. 4 hours a day, flexible timing. If it works out, we'll talk long-term." She paused, then asked, "What about health coverage?" Vic blinked. "You expecting?" She placed a hand gently on her belly. It wasn't obvious under her blouse. He nodded once. "Okay. Let's figure something out." It was the first time in months someone saw her as valuable, not vulnerable. She walked out of that meeting with a login, a badge, and a desk, not a mop. The next 6 weeks flew. She split her time between Mira's apartment, the office, and prenatal visits. Sleep was brief. Meals were quick. But her mind stayed alert. She fixed vendor contracts, restructured payroll, and created templates no one asked for but everyone started using. Vic promoted her to operations coordinator by week 5. The title felt foreign. The respect didn't. She started dressing differently. Still modest, but firmer lines, darker colors. Her belly showed now, and she wore it plainly. Nobody stared. They just moved aside when she walked down the hall, not out of pity, but out of acknowledgement. The day her water broke, she was in the middle of a performance audit presentation. She didn't panic. She passed the tablet to Vic and said, "Page 9 is where the savings are hidden. Make them listen." Then she walked out and called Mira. 2 hours later, in a city hospital room with peeling wallpaper, Elena held her daughter against her chest. She didn't cry. She just looked down at Nyla's face and whispered, "No one will ever treat you like you don't belong." Vic visited the next day. He brought flowers and a contract. "You don't have to look at this now," he said, "but when you're ready, I want you back. You've outgrown the job I gave you." She flipped to the last page and saw the equity offer. 30%. She blinked. I'm not sure I can manage full-time right away. We'll cover daycare." At the office, "My sister runs one downstairs. Nyla's spot is already saved." Elena didn't know how to say thank you, so she didn't. She just signed. Nova Grid exploded within 12 months. They secured seed funding, then Series A, then a quiet buyout offer from a major logistics tech firm. By the time the acquisition went through, Elena's payout crossed 7 digits. She didn't buy a car. She didn't buy a house. She bought time, for Nyla, for herself, and for the plan that had been forming ever since she'd walked out of Ashmere with a folded check and no dignity. She started building her portfolio. Small investments, clean companies, no noise, no drama. She rejected deals with fast money and dirty metrics. People called her cold. She preferred the word selective. It wasn't until her third investment, an eco-supply chain startup in trouble, that the name Vane Tech popped up again. Buried in the acquisition clause was a clause referencing a minor contract with Vane Tech Innovations, a subsidiary handling expired patents and dead-end tech. It was worth almost nothing. She bought it anyway. 4 million. Cash, no calls. No notice, not even a blink. To her, it was just another dead division to clean up. Until she opened the internal files and found the memo. "Terminate the maid. She's a distraction, and I don't do distractions. M. Vane." She read it twice. then closed the file, and smiled, not because it hurt, but because it no longer could. Have you ever been pushed out by someone who thought you wouldn't survive without them? Have you ever had to rebuild from the ground with no help, no support, just your will to keep going? If this chapter hit close to home, drop a comment below saying, "They didn't break me." Tell us where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to rise quietly like Elena. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder. The people they overlooked today might run the show tomorrow. Elena never planned to build an empire. In the early months of Nyla's life, all she wanted was stability. No noise, no drama, no headlines. She kept her head down at Nova Grid, working from home in the mornings and bringing Nyla to the office in the afternoons. While other executives flashed watches and flew to tech expos, Elena sat, cross-legged on the daycare floor reading color books between Zoom calls. She didn't network. She didn't pitch. She just solved problems. And people started noticing. Nova Grid COO stepped down unexpectedly. Too much travel. A newborn on the way. Vic held a quick vote among the founders. When he called Elena into the small conference room with glass walls, she thought it was to discuss schedules. Instead, he said, "You're the most organized person in this building. You keep everyone calm. Take the COO seat, please." She blinked. "I'm not." "You are," he interrupted. "And if you say no, this company's going to lose its backbone." So she said yes, not because she wanted power, but because it made sense. And when things make sense, Elena moves. 2 months in, their metrics improved across the board. Supplier delays dropped by 22%, payroll errors dropped to 0, and their investor meetings, no longer chaotic pitch decks and empty buzzwords. Elena brought spreadsheets, solid numbers, and a quiet confidence that silenced even the loudest boardroom skeptics. At home, things were simple. Mira watched Nyla when work overflowed. Elena still cooked for herself, still folded her own clothes, still packed her daughter's bag every Sunday night with labeled snacks and backup onesies. But her mind had shifted. She no longer looked for approval. She watched systems, people. She started seeing patterns, how mediocrity got promoted when dressed in confidence, how men stumbled through investor calls but landed 7-figure deals with charm and buzzwords. She took notes and built quietly. One weekend, during a casual founders mixer, a woman in a silver wrap dress leaned toward Elena and asked, "Which firm funds you?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "I fund myself." The woman smiled, polite but doubtful. "Oh, you're one of those self-funded girls. Must be refreshing." Elena smiled back. "Refreshing is watching a man who once fired you walk into a meeting you own." The woman blinked. Elena sipped her drink and walked away. She started saying yes to board invitations, selectively. She invested in a vertical farming pilot, a supply chain software group, an AI-driven retail tracker. All small, all clean, all hers. She never attached her name publicly. But her signature sat on the paperwork of 7 startups by the time Nyla turned 2. Her share in Nova Grid remained untouched. Vic had offered her a buyout option. She declined. "I'm not done here," she told him. He respected that. So did the rest of the team, because by now everyone in the company knew if something was broken, you called Elena. It was around that time she started getting calls from people she hadn't spoken to in years. A high school friend, an ex-roommate from Culver Creek, even a cousin who once mocked her for cleaning homes. They all had one thing in common. They heard she was doing well and wanted to reconnect. She answered none of them, except one. A woman named Cassie who used to scrub kitchens with her on night shift. They had shared a locker, laughed quietly about rich people's secrets, watched each other survive. Cassie's message was short. "If you ever need someone you don't have to explain anything to, I'm still around." Elena invited her to lunch. They picked up where they left off, like time had frozen. And for the first time in years, Elena laughed over food that wasn't reheated. Cassie didn't ask about money. She asked about Nyla. And Elena left that lunch feeling something she hadn't in a long time: safe. Later that night, after Nyla fell asleep, Elena sat on her living room floor with her laptop open and documents scattered. She was reviewing a potential acquisition deal, a struggling logistics wing from a dying retail chain. The math was ugly, but the structure, familiar. The same outdated software, the same bloated budget practices, the same pattern she'd once seen on a whiteboard and corrected with a Sharpie. She thought of that day often, the day she changed her future by quietly fixing a problem no one had asked her to. Back then, she was just trying to help. Now, she was making moves. She leaned back in her chair, pulled her robe tighter, and whispered to herself, "Everything I needed, I already had." Within 10 months, Nova Grid's valuation doubled. By the 12th, it tripled. And in the 15th, the company made headlines, not because of flashy tech or outlandish founders, but because their logistics model outperformed every legacy competitor without over-promising. Elena had designed that model. It was based on consistency, not gimmicks, simplicity, not spin. When a major tech outlet reached out for a CEO interview, Vic replied, "Talk to the person who built our back end. Her name is Elena." She declined the feature. She preferred to keep building. Inside the company, everyone knew who ran things. Elena's name wasn't on the front page, but her fingerprints were on every line item, system, and milestone. New hires were sent to her first. Investors began requesting her presence at meetings. Other founders reached out, asking her to join their advisory boards. She said no to most, but she watched, studied their patterns, and made a list. She called it Clean Plays, a spreadsheet of broken but fixable companies that needed structure more than capital. By Nyla's 3rd birthday, she'd backed 5 of them, quietly, always from behind, until one of those companies brought her back to a name she thought she'd buried: Vane Tech. It was buried inside a merger packet. A logistics tech firm, Raxon, was planning to offload its underperforming subsidiaries to simplify its books. One of those divisions, Vane Tech Innovations. The same Vane Tech Malric Vane had once ruled like a crown prince, now listed as a legacy IP unit with negative asset flow. Translation: dead weight. Elena raised one eyebrow. Price: listed at $4.5 million, her advisor said. But honestly, Raxon wants it gone. I think you could land it at 4. She didn't hesitate. Buy it. No press release. No boardroom debate. No name attached. Just one woman in soft denim, nursing a tea while her toddler slept, across her lap, buying a piece of the empire that once discarded her. The files arrived a week later. She sifted through them at night, careful not to wake Nyla. Page after page of bloated costs, stagnant patents, mismanaged funds. But she found something else, tucked in an archived communication log. An internal memo: "Terminate the Maid. She's a distraction, and I don't do distractions. M. Vane." She read it in silence, then smiled. Not because it hurt, but because it proved he hadn't seen her at all. And now, she owned the file. She didn't delete it. She moved it to a folder labeled Perspective, then kept building. Within 2 quarters, she'd cleaned the division's books, repurposed its IP, and merged it into a sustainable e-commerce platform back-end. Profits surged. But Elena still didn't go public. She didn't want recognition. She wanted reach. Power wasn't about being known. It was about being undeniable, even if no one clapped for you. Mira noticed the difference first. "You don't flinch anymore," she said one night after dinner. Elena glanced up. "What do you mean? You used to hold your breath every time your phone buzzed. Now, you let it ring." Elena didn't respond. Because Mira was right. She no longer feared being replaced, erased, or rejected. Not because she was untouchable, but because she'd rebuilt a life where no one could take what they didn't give. The last piece clicked when Nova Grid got an offer from Vextrum Capital, one of the most aggressive venture firms in the country. Their executive team requested a meeting. Vic prepped his usual pitch. But before the call began, he pulled Elena aside. "They want you on the call. Not just as co-o. They know who you are now. Elena stared at the invitation, then smiled. No slides, just the numbers. Vic laughed. You always say that. That's because numbers don't need applause. The call lasted 40 minutes. By the end, Vekstrom offered $60 million for a 51% stake. The team celebrated. Elena didn't drink that night. She went home early, put Nyla to bed, then opened her laptop and started drafting the next wave of acquisitions. Not because she needed more, but because there were still systems out there, messy, loud, broken, waiting for someone who knew how to clean. The hospital bracelet stayed on her wrist for 3 days after Nyla was born. Not because she forgot to cut it off, but because she needed the reminder that she had started over, completely, not just as a woman, not just as a mother, but as someone who no longer belonged to anyone's narrative. She wasn't the help, she wasn't the maid, and she certainly wasn't the mistake. She was Nyla's mother now, and she was never going to hand her child a life where they had to earn respect with silence and obedience. The early months were a blur. Sleep came in 90-minute stretches. Meals were whatever Mira could prep between her shifts. The apartment felt smaller, hotter, but Elena didn't complain, because while Nyla napped in the afternoons, Elena worked. She mapped logistics. She tracked vendors. She rewrote SOPs for 3 companies she now co-owned. Vic thought she was superhuman. I don't know how you're doing this, he told her one afternoon during a financial call. She smiled gently. You'd be surprised what you can build when you're not waiting to be invited. At the 6-month mark, Elena took her first big personal risk. She didn't buy property or upgrade her car. She bought time. A private childcare specialist, part-time, vetted, gentle, experienced with working mothers. Not because she wanted to be away from Nyla, but because she wanted Nyla to see what presence with purpose looked like. When Elena worked, she worked fully. When she held her daughter, nothing else existed. That split, that focus, it gave her power. It gave her clarity, and it showed in everything she touched. By the time Nyla was walking, Elena had doubled her stake in Nova Grid. Vic moved to San Diego to lead expansion, and Elena stayed behind in New York, taking full control of East Coast operations. She restructured the leadership team, cut waste, promoted staff who had been overlooked. The company became faster, sharper, cleaner, like her. She rented an office downtown. Nothing flashy, just clean lines, large windows, and a door she could close. Across the street was a preschool she'd already toured. Nyla's name was on the wait list. She'd be starting there in the fall. It made everything feel more real, less reactive, more intentional. She wasn't escaping anything anymore. She was choosing, and every choice counted. Her reputation grew quietly. Founders whispered her name in VC meetings. She's the one who flipped that logistics firm. She cleaned up Vaintech's old mess. She doesn't talk much, but her spreadsheets make people shut up and listen. She got requests every week now. Partnerships, interviews, book deals. She declined 90% of them. But the ones she accepted, game changers. The turning point came when she received a private invitation to the Eastbridge Capital Women's Venture Roundtable. Not a press-heavy event, just 30 powerful women in tech, private capital, and leadership. She almost didn't go, but Mira convinced her. You don't need them, she said, but they need to see what quiet power looks like. Elena arrived in a tailored black suit, no jewelry except a gold band on her right middle finger, a piece she'd bought herself the week she'd bought Vaintech Innovations, not as a symbol of success, but as a reminder, I wasn't supposed to be here. But I am. The room was full of flash, designer dresses, glossy presentations, buzzword-padded speeches. Elena sat near the back, spoke when asked, listened when others performed. Then, during a small breakout session on restructuring equity deals, she made a quiet correction to a guest speaker's projection model. The speaker, a partner at a large VC firm, froze. Wait, are you saying we've been mispricing series A conversions? Elena nodded. By about 18%. You're not accounting for employee clawbacks under the new grant model. The room went quiet. Then it exploded in questions. For the next 20 minutes, Elena led, not loudly, not dramatically, but with absolute clarity. By the end, 5 women asked for her card. She gave it to none. "Send me your deal terms," she said. "If it's clean, I'll reach out," and walked out. Mira called her the next morning. "How'd it go?" Elena looked down at her inbox. 12 follow-ups, 3 proposals, 1 dinner invitation. "I was seen," she said quietly. Mira exhaled. Finally, that night, after Nyla fell asleep, Elena walked over to the large whiteboard in her bedroom, the one she only touched after midnight. She erased the top row and wrote something new. Next, ownership, control, legacy. Underneath it she added, "Don't get loud, get undeniable." Then circled it once, twice, and turned off the light. The first time someone referred to Elena as a quiet investor, she let it slide. The second time, she corrected them. "I don't invest quietly," she said. "I build without warning." From that moment forward, she stopped taking advisory roles. She started acquiring. Her strategy was simple: find the mess, fix it silently, own it outright. Her first acquisition was a failing packaging distributor that had lost 40% of its client base. Elena met with the owner once, scanned his books, and bought him out in 5 days. She restructured his staff, sold half the fleet, and replaced the outdated invoicing system with a cleaner automated back-end. Within 4 months, the company turned a profit. It didn't make headlines, but it made her team trust her completely. No spin, just results. She moved fast after that. A frozen freight logistics startup, a raw materials supplier, a digital vendor matching platform, and then a quiet deal no one saw coming. A controlling stake in Vaintech Logistics East. She'd already bought a dying subsidiary of Vaintech. But this was strategic, because it came with access to Vaintech's oldest contracts, files, and legacy infrastructure. Her legal team raised concerns. Maurik Vane may still have minority rights to some of these systems. She looked at the clause. He won't stop it. He doesn't have the power anymore. She was right. The sale went through in under 2 weeks, and with it, she owned the bones of the very company that once erased her. It wasn't personal, not anymore, but it was precise. Because Elena didn't want to embarrass Maurik, she wanted to replace him without saying a single word. And now? She had. Her office was no longer small. She upgraded into a suite with 2 floors, a childcare pod, and a conference wing lined with matte black glass. Nyla's drawings hung behind her desk. Every deal passed through her hands. Every meeting started when she arrived. Every system had her logic, her rhythm, her simplicity. She didn't ask anyone to call her CEO. They just did. Even Vic. "Lena," he said one day, stopping by her office, "do you realize you're running 4 companies right now?" She nodded. "And 1 preschool schedule," she added with a half smile. He laughed. "Seriously, I'm proud of you." She looked up from her screen. "I'm not done yet." A month later, she got the report from her analyst. Vaintech Holdings, the original mother company, was hemorrhaging. Fast. Internal lawsuits, a failed AI expansion, a data breach cover-up, investors pulling out, and Maurik gone. No board seat, no public appearance in months. His apartment had been foreclosed. His name wiped from the website. All that was left of his empire was a hollow legal shell, and the pieces Elena had already collected. She stared at the report in silence, then wrote 2 words across the top in pen: "He's done." That night, after putting Nyla to bed, Elena poured a glass of water, turned off her phone, and opened an old file folder from her personal archives. Inside were 3 things. 1. A printout of her first Nova Grid contract. 2. A snapshot of her hospital bracelet from Nyla's birth. 3. A torn check from Ashmere Estate, the one they gave her the day they fired her. She looked at each one. Slowly. No rage. No sadness. Just confirmation that everything they thought would bury her, built her. And now? She didn't need their apology, because she already had their position. The next morning, her assistant walked in holding a letter with no return address. "It's handwritten," she said. "From someone named Malric Vane." Elena didn't blink. Set it on the table. She didn't open it. Not yet. She had calls to take, numbers to run, systems to rebuild. But she would, eventually. And when she did, it wouldn't be with bitterness. It would be with clarity, because now she knew being underestimated had been the greatest gift she was ever given. The elevator doors opened, and Malric Vane stepped out onto a floor he didn't recognize. Same company name on the outside, different world inside. He adjusted the collar of his jacket, not tailored, not expensive, and walked slowly past rows of unfamiliar desks. Younger staff, new systems, different energy. No one looked up. Once, people rose when he walked into a room. Now, they didn't even glance. He approached the front desk. "I'm here to see the board." The woman behind the glass monitor blinked. "Name? Malric Vane." She paused, then typed. Silence. More typing. Then a polite smile. "Please wait here one moment." She picked up the phone, her tone unchanged. "There's someone here. Says he's Malric Vane." Another pause. Then a nod. "The 12th floor. They said you can come up." She handed him a guest pass, color-coded. No clearance badge, just visitor. He took it, swallowed, and walked toward the second elevator. His fingers shook slightly as he pressed the button, not from fear, from something worse. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, the air was colder, quieter, less startup buzz, more surgical precision. Malric stepped out into a glass corridor with matte black walls and quiet lighting. A woman with a tablet met him halfway. "This way, sir." She didn't introduce herself, didn't ask who he was. She already knew. She led him down the hallway toward a corner suite with double glass doors. And there, standing by the window with the skyline behind her, was a woman in a tailored charcoal suit and soft heels. No apron, no hesitation, no fear. Just Elena. She didn't turn right away. She was reading a report. When she finally looked up, her voice didn't rise. Her posture didn't shift. "Didn't expect to see you here." Malric cleared his throat. "I didn't expect this." Her eyes stayed on him. "I bought the division 18 months ago. It's part of my group now." He blinked. "You don't have the capital to—" "I didn't," she cut in. "Then, I built it." He looked around slowly, as if still hoping this was some elaborate joke. "You were my maid." "I was," she said plainly. "You cleaned my house. I ran your house, quietly, efficiently, like I do this one." He took a shaky step forward. "I lost everything." "I read," she said. "Fraud investigation, data breach. You over-leveraged your expansion into predictive software. And the board removed your voting rights." He swallowed. I never expected you to matter." She said. "No," he said quickly. "To become this." She tilted her head slightly. "I didn't become anything. I just stopped accepting less." There was silence between them. He looked tired, older, the weight of collapse visible in his face, in his clothes, in the way his shoes creaked from too much use. She, on the other hand, looked exactly the same as she had the day they fired her, except now the room was hers. "Why are you here, Malric?" His mouth opened, then closed. Finally he said, "I want to rebuild." Her gaze didn't shift. "And? I thought maybe you'd hear me out. Maybe there's a space, anywhere." She didn't answer. She walked to her desk and pressed a button. A quiet chime sounded. 2 members of security stepped into view from the far corner of the hall. "Escort Mr. Vane to the exit. His badge is no longer valid here." He didn't move. He looked at her like he was still trying to understand how the story flipped. "But I made you—" "No," she said. "You dismissed me. That's not the same thing." The guards took a step forward. Malric stepped back. "I'm not here to cause problems." "I know," she said calmly. "But you still have to go." As the doors closed behind him, Elena sat back down and returned to her numbers. The quarterly report still needed review. Investor terms still needed adjusting, and her daughter's snack bag still needed packing. Because real power didn't pause for ghosts. It moved forward. Always. The envelope came 3 days later, handwritten, no return address. It arrived with the morning mail, mixed in with contracts, budget summaries, and a new proposal from a logistics firm in Austin. Her assistant didn't open it, just placed it on her desk with a yellow sticky note. "Looks personal." Elena didn't open it right away. She set it aside, went back to her calendar. There was a team check-in at 10, vendor call at 1, school pickup at 3:30. She didn't open the envelope at lunch either, not because she feared what was inside, but because she already knew what it was. A man like Malric Vane didn't show up without sending something afterward. Guilt had a rhythm. It always followed silence. That night, after Nyla fell asleep with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, Elena sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and the letter resting beside it. She opened it slowly. No perfume, no weight, just ink, slanted handwriting, page after page. "Elena, I don't know where to begin, so I'll just begin badly. I ruined what wasn't mine to ruin. And I know you don't owe me anything. Not forgiveness, not a second glance. But I'm writing because I've had time, more than I wanted. And every hour I've spent thinking has brought me back to the same image. You in the library, with that glass of wine, sitting beside a candle, while I talked about nothing, and you listened, like it mattered. That version of me didn't deserve you, not even for one night. You didn't speak often, but you spoke clearly, and I heard more truth in your silences than in all the boardrooms I ran. I didn't see your strength then, because men like me don't look at the help and think, she could build something I never could. But you did, and I see that now. You built it all without noise, without bitterness. And I hope, one day, you'll let me apologize in person." Elena read it once, then again, not with tears, not with anger, just quiet. She folded it neatly and placed it in her bottom desk drawer beneath Nyla's old baby monitor and a keychain from her Nova Grid promotion. Then she closed the drawer and left it there. A week passed. No follow-up, no message, until one Friday afternoon when she picked up Nyla from preschool and saw him across the street. He wasn't waiting at her door. He wasn't in a suit, just jeans, a navy sweater, and a paperback novel in his hand. He looked like any other man waiting for a meeting he wasn't sure would happen. She walked past him without stopping. He didn't follow, didn't wave, just nodded and waited. The next week, he was there again. Same spot, same quiet. Nyla pointed. "Mummy, that's the man who dropped the bunny last time." Elena's breath caught. She hadn't known he'd helped. She didn't ask when or how. She just nodded. "He's waiting for someone," she said. But even Nyla knew. "He's waiting for you." The third week, Elena sent Mira a message. "Can you pick Nyla up today?" Mira didn't ask why, just replied, "Of course." Elena left the office early, wore no makeup, no blazer, just a coat and scarf. She crossed the street at 3:30 sharp. He saw her coming, didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her. When she reached him, she spoke first. "You're early. I didn't want to miss you." Silence. She looked at the book in his hand. "You read now?" He smiled faintly. "Trying." She nodded once, then looked him in the eye. "If you want to be in her life, there are rules. Okay, you don't get to pick weekends like they're hobbies." "Understood." She's not leverage, she's not access, she's her own person, and you're going to earn every minute with her. He took a breath. "Good. I don't want shortcuts anymore." She studied his face for a long time, then said, "Start with Wednesdays, 1 hour. No gifts, no questions about me, just her." He didn't blink. "I'll be here." She nodded, turned, walked away. He didn't follow. He didn't call after her. Because for the first time in his life, Malric Vane was learning what it meant to wait. And, Elena, she was learning that power isn't about the door you close. It's about the ones you choose to open, on your own terms. The office staff didn't recognize him, and that was the point. Malric Vane no longer entered buildings to be seen. He entered them hoping no one would remember who he used to be. He arrived 10 minutes early for his first day at Vestra Solutions, a mid-sized logistics company now quietly owned by Elena's investment firm. Not a flashy name, not a powerful brand, but it was a door, and she had opened it, barely. He wore no tie, no cufflinks, just a pressed button-up shirt and old slacks that hadn't fit right since Zurich. At the front desk, a young man in a hoodie scanned him with polite indifference. Name? Malric Vane. The receptionist tapped a few keys. You're shadowing ops under Ms. Dre. Yes. Second floor. Room 202. Clock in at the tablet on your right. He nodded. Didn't correct him. Didn't mention that he used to own 12 floors like this. That he once walked through glass towers where people bowed without thinking. Those days were gone. And maybe that was necessary. His new desk was small, metal, scuffed on the corner. It faced the supply cabinet and shared a wall with the restroom. He didn't complain. He didn't even flinch. He took the orientation binder and started reading. By 11 a.m., he was already labeling old invoices for digital archiving. By 1 p.m., he was entering vendor dates into a platform he'd never heard of before. By 3 p.m., he was taking notes on a shipping discrepancy log. No one offered him a shortcut. No one said, "Weren't you that guy?" He liked it that way. Because, this time, he was working for something other than himself. At the end of the day, as he packed up his things, he looked across the open workspace and saw a familiar figure in the hallway. Elena. She wasn't dressed to impress. Just black trousers, a fitted coat, and a scarf that matched Nyla's backpack. She wasn't there to check in. She didn't even stop walking. But their eyes met for half a second, and that was enough. The next day, he showed up again. Same desk, same binder, more spreadsheets, more silence. He brought a packed lunch and ate outside on the curb. No wine, no meetings, no handlers, just a sandwich in foil and a bottle of water. By the end of week 1, Ms. Dre sent a short report to Elena's office. New hire shows no ego, accepts corrections without hesitation, double-checked his own error log. Might be worth retaining. Elena read it, didn't comment, just forwarded it to HR. Extend contract, part-time only. Review at 30 days. Wednesday came, and with it, his first scheduled hour with Nyla. He waited by the playground gate at 3:20. Elena arrived at 3:35, holding Nyla's hand, dressed in her usual low-key professional coat. Nyla ran to him without hesitation. He knelt to greet her, holding back emotion. "You brought the book," she said. He nodded. "We're on chapter 3, right?" Elena stood nearby, watching, not interfering. Nyla sat beside him on the park bench and cracked open the book with the intensity of a child on a mission. They read for 40 minutes. He did all the voices. She giggled and leaned in. Elena said nothing. She didn't even sit. She just watched. That night, he didn't write another letter, didn't ask for more. He knew the hour had been a gift, not a right. And he wasn't about to break what he hadn't earned. By the end of the 3rd week, Ms. Dre's next report read, Vane is consistent, organized, doesn't ask for favors, staff warming to him, still quiet, still shows up. That was all Elena needed. She added a new clause to his contract. Eligible for internal project work, no title, performance-based. Mira noticed first. How long do you plan to let him do this? She asked one evening as they prepared dinner. Elena didn't pause. As long as he keeps doing it without asking for more, Mira set down the knife. He's trying. I know. Do you still feel something? Elena looked up, not surprised by the question, but not ready to answer it either. I feel curious, because that was the truth, not attraction. Not longing, but curiosity. What does a man become after the applause is gone? Who does he choose to be when no one is watching? The next Wednesday, Nyla gave him a drawing. A stick figure with wild hair. 2 others beside it. One labeled me, one labeled Mama. The third had a question mark. He looked up at Elena. She met his eyes and nodded once. Next week, she said, you can pick her up alone. 1 hour. His voice cracked. Thank you. She didn't smile, just said, don't be late. The first time Malric picked Nyla up alone, he was 15 minutes early. He waited outside the preschool gate, holding a paper bag with 2 sandwiches, a juice box and a book. The next in the series they'd started, Nyla spotted him before he saw her. Malric, she shouted, barreling forward. Not Dad, not yet, but not Mr. Vane either. That alone made his throat tighten. She grabbed his hand like they'd been doing this for years. He didn't say much, just smiled, took her backpack, and walked her to the nearby bench under a row of quiet trees. He'd memorized her allergies, packed the right sandwich, brought the right color crayon pack. She noticed. You remember a lot, she said, mouth full. He nodded. I try to. She leaned in. Mama remembers everything. He laughed quietly. She always did. Nyla blinked at him, then asked, do you miss her? He didn't flinch, didn't try to dodge the question. I miss the things I didn't see when I should have. She tilted her head like she didn't fully understand, but didn't press. Kids know when something's heavy. They also know when to leave it where it is. At 4:30 sharp, Elena pulled up in her car. Malric stood with Nyla's backpack already zipped and her snack wrapper folded neatly into a side pocket. Elena didn't speak at first. She just looked, checked Nyla's face, her posture, her mood, all good. Nyla climbed into the car, buckled up, and waved. See you next time. Elena nodded once at Malric. Not a smile, but not distance either. Just acknowledgement that he had done what he said he would, nothing more, nothing less. That night, she stood by her kitchen window, watching the city blink back at her. Mira dried dishes beside her. He's showing up. I see that, Elena said. You think it's real? Elena exhaled. I think he's tired of pretending to be the man he used to be. Mira leaned her hip on the counter. And what about you? Elena stared out the window a while longer, then whispered, I don't miss him, but I'm starting to respect who he's trying to become. The following week, Malric sat in on his first strategy meeting at Vestra. He didn't lead. He didn't speak unless prompted, but he brought data, clean, tight, unpolished numbers that filled in a gap the team hadn't noticed. When the meeting ended, Ms. Dre tapped her pen against the table. Useful work, she said. Surprising. Malric nodded. I've had a lot of time to notice things people ignore. 2 weeks later, Elena invited him to a parent group event at Nyla's preschool. He showed up early, wore a soft blazer and held a homemade poster they designed together. He didn't try to sit beside Elena. He stayed on the other end of the row, but when Nyla pointed at him from the stage, beaming, Elena caught his reaction. It wasn't ego. It wasn't pride. It was gratitude for being allowed to stand there. After the event, they walked side by side through the hallway. Nyla skipped ahead, chattering about paper crowns and juice boxes. Malric broke the silence. I never thought you'd speak to me again. I didn't either, Elena replied. He looked at her, quiet, careful. But you did. She kept her eyes forward. Because I needed Nyla to see the difference between leaving and returning. He nodded once. She's everything. She's watching everything, Elena said. Even when you think she's not. They reached the parking lot. Nyla climbed into her seat and kicked her shoes off with a laugh. Elena closed the door gently, then turned to him. For now, you get Wednesdays and Fridays. He straightened. Okay. Same rules, same limits. He nodded. And don't think this means we're rewriting history. His voice stayed low. I wouldn't ask you to. She studied him for a moment, then said, but you're starting to write something new. That night, Malric didn't celebrate. He didn't drink. He didn't even turn on the lights when he got home. He sat in the quiet and read Nyla's drawing for the 5th time. A new one this time, of all 3 of them under a cartoon sun. This one had no question marks. Just names. Me, Mama, Malric. No title, no role. Just a presence. And that was more than he deserved. But exactly what he hoped to become. Have you ever watched someone you once trusted try to rebuild what they broke? Not with apologies, not with gifts, but by showing up, quietly, consistently. If you've ever been in a position where you had to decide whether someone deserved a second chance, drop a comment, show me, don't tell me, tell us where you're watching from. Hit like if you believe redemption starts with effort. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is just getting started, and so is his climb back. Nyla's Friday pickups had become routine. Malric waited at the gate. She ran to him. He carried her backpack, let her talk endlessly, and returned her safely with every detail accounted for. No drama, no surprises. Elena appreciated that. She never said it aloud. But she watched him. Every time. From across the lot, from the sidewalk, from behind tinted glass. He always followed the rules. Never pushed, never asked for more. Which is why, when Nyla's class sent home a form for Parent-Partner Day, Elena hesitated at the kitchen table. It was a Saturday event. 1 parent, 1 child, 1 workshop, and Nyla, in bright purple marker, had already circled the answer, Malric. She could have crossed it out. She could have asked Nyla why, but she didn't. Instead, she folded the form and placed it in Nyla's school folder, then sent a short text. Workshop this Saturday, 10 a.m. She chose you. Don't be late. He replied within a minute. I'll be there. Thank you. No emojis, no double texts, no overreach, just presence, and lately that was enough. Saturday arrived with crisp skies and soft wind. Elena dropped Nyla off early. She didn't stay. She didn't linger in the hallway or sit in the back row like some parents. She left them space. That was the whole point. Let him build with Nyla what he never did before. Let him feel the weight of connection without anyone watching. And let her rest, just for one morning, without holding the entire day in her hands. When she returned at noon, the school gym was buzzing. Kids were showing off paper-built rockets, foam towers, finger paint bridges, and in the back, kneeling beside a perfectly crafted block city, was Malric. Glue on his shirt, sticker on his cheek, Nyla beside him, laughing like the world had no edge. He didn't see Elena at first. She ran up, hugged her leg, and held up the small gold star sticker she'd earned. Did you see? We built the tallest. Elena crouched and kissed her cheek. I'm proud of you. Malric approached quietly, hands still stained with marker. You did great, Elena said to Nyla, but her eyes flicked to him. He nodded, humble. She led. I just followed. Elena raised an eyebrow. Learning something new, are you? He gave a faint smile. I've had the right teacher. As they walked to the car, Nyla chattered in the back seat while Malric walked beside Elena, carrying the project bag. They moved in silence at first, comfortable, steady. Then he said, I think about that night in the library sometimes. She didn't look at him. Which part? The part before I ruined everything? Her steps slowed. She kept her voice even. You didn't ruin everything, Malric. You just proved what you valued more. He exhaled. I wasn't ready for the truth. Not yours. Not mine. And now, I live with it. She finally looked at him. You don't get points for regret. He nodded. I know. But I'm not looking for points. Just the truth. She stared for a second. Then, opened the car door. Nyla climbed in, humming. Before closing it, Elena said, Truth is, I'm still waiting to see who you become without power. He met her eyes. I hope I'm showing you. That night, she opened a folder she hadn't touched in months. It was labeled simply, Nyla's Future. Inside were documents, school plans, medical papers, emergency contacts, And beside them, one line she'd left blank for over 4 years, secondary guardian. She didn't fill it in that night, but she left the folder open on her desk. And that was a start. Tuesday night. Quiet. Nyla had fallen asleep early after dance class. Her little socks still dotted with sparkles, her curls a mess from too much twirling. Elena stood by the stove, reheating leftover soup, when her phone buzzed. "Malric, do you have 20 minutes tomorrow after drop-off? I'd like to talk. Not about Nyla. About us. You don't have to say yes." She read it twice, then once more. She didn't reply right away. She poured herself tea, sat down, and stared at her own reflection in the window. The next morning, as the preschool gate closed behind Nyla, Malric stood by the fence, hands in his pockets. He didn't assume, didn't walk up, just waited. Elena joined him after a long pause. "I have 15, that's enough." They walked toward a quiet bench at the far end of the block, beneath a wide tree whose leaves were starting to turn. No noise, no eye contact, until she sat. He didn't speak right away. She appreciated that. Finally, he said, "There's a lot I could say. I've drafted speeches, but I deleted all of them." She didn't smile. "Smart choice. I guess what I want to ask is..." He paused. "Was there ever a version of us that could have worked?" She looked at him. Not soft, not cold, just steady. "No," she said. "Not with the man you were then." He nodded slowly. "And now?" She shook her head. "This isn't a love story, Malric. This is a story about responsibility." His jaw tightened, but he didn't push. "You were used to controlling people with money. You didn't see me because I wasn't a deal. I wasn't leverage." He exhaled. "You're right. I know." Silence. Then she said something that surprised even her. "But I think you're learning to see now." He looked over at her, carefully. "I don't expect us to be anything. I just want to be a man Nyla's proud to know." Elena tilted her head. "That's a higher standard than you think." "I hope so." They didn't say goodbye. When she stood, he stood. When she turned, he let her walk first. Back to their separate cars, back to their separate lives. But something had shifted. Not enough to change the past, but enough to maybe shape the future. That weekend, Mira came by with groceries and half a dozen questions. "How's your not-boyfriend doing?" Elena gave her a look. "We're not rebuilding anything." Mira shrugged. "You're letting him see Nyla. She's allowed to have a father who shows up." Mira placed the bread on the counter. "You're also allowed to feel something again, Lena." Elena paused. "Feeling something isn't the same as trusting someone." "No," Mira said. "But it's the first brick." That night, Elena checked Nyla's backpack and found a small note folded inside one of her books. Written in crayon. "Mama, Malric said sorry to the lunch lady when he spilled juice. He didn't even yell. I like that." Elena sat with that, and finally, after nearly 5 years of carrying the weight of silence, she whispered, "Good." The office kitchen was silent when Malric walked in, early, as usual. He liked arriving before the noise, before the clatter of keyboards, before the tension of deliverables, before anyone could ask him who he used to be. He brewed coffee like he always did. Black, 1 mug, no extra cup for anyone else. He didn't bring 2 anymore. He didn't expect anyone to sit across from him, waiting to hear something smart or powerful or visionary. He wasn't the headline anymore. He was the support, and that suited him. By 9:15, the floor had filled with people, and the tension began. A shipment had been rerouted. One of Vestra's oldest suppliers had shorted inventory. Delays were stacking. Staff panicked. Emails piled. Malric didn't speak first. He watched, listened, then stepped into Ms. Dre's office. "I think I can help." She didn't scoff, didn't dismiss. She leaned back in her chair. "Talk." He laid it out cleanly. 3 key calls, 2 backup vendors, 1 system reset. No magic, no posturing, just logic. Dre stared at him after he finished. "You've done this before." "I've seen worse," he said. She tilted her head. You created worse. He didn't flinch. That's why I know how to fix it. Dre handed him her iPad. Do it. But don't burn anything on the way out. By noon, the calls had been made. By 2 p.m., alternate shipments were en route. By 4 p.m., the team gathered in the lounge to quietly acknowledge what had almost turned into disaster. Malric didn't sit with them. He cleaned up the printouts, reset the spreadsheet, rechecked vendor confirmations, and left at 4:58 with a quiet nod. The next morning, an internal message pinged in Elena's inbox. Subject, Staff Adjustment Recommendation. Malric Vane has stabilized 3 key supplier relationships. No overreach, no credit seeking. Recommend testing him in project planning cycle next quarter. Dre. Elena read it once, then again. She didn't reply, but she saved the message and moved Malric's file from probationary to Tier 2 advisory. That weekend, Nyla came home with a paper crown and a new word in her vocabulary. Dependable. Elena raised an eyebrow. Where'd you learn that? Malric said it. He said I'm dependable because I always show up when I say I will. Elena stirred her tea. That's a good word. I said he's dependable too. Elena hesitated, then smiled. Maybe he's starting to be. Later that night, she opened her calendar. Her birthday was 2 weeks away. She had no plans, no party, no interest. She never did. But for the first time in years, she found herself wondering what it would feel like to sit across a table from someone who didn't need her to carry the weight of every conversation. Not romance, not a do-over, just presence. Maybe that was enough. Maybe, sometimes, redemption looked like showing up with nothing to prove and being asked to stay anyway. Elena had never been one for birthdays. No streamers, no candles, no noise. But when Nyla insisted on making a handmade card with buttons glued in the shape of a heart, something shifted. It wasn't about celebration, it was about acknowledgement, and Malric had picked up on that. He didn't show up with flowers. He showed up with groceries, and a folded napkin with 2 sentences. Happy birthday. You don't have to talk. Let me cook. She let him in, watched him move in the kitchen like it was neutral ground. No ego, no performance, just garlic, olive oil, and a steady pace. He made pasta from scratch, sauce from scratch, and said only one thing after plating. You've spent years feeding everyone else. She blinked. I didn't even tell you I like pasta. You didn't have to. They ate in silence, not uncomfortable, not urgent. Just 2 people sitting across a table, with no past to prove and no future to predict. Only the evening. Nyla fell asleep early. Elena tucked her in, came back, and found Malric putting dishes away like he belonged, but not assuming he did. Thanks, she said. For what? For remembering I exist beyond function. He paused, then met her eyes. I see you now, Elena. I didn't before. That's on me. She leaned against the counter. Do you ever wonder if this version of you would have made a better husband? He didn't smile, didn't flinch. Every day, do you expect me to forget? No. Forgive? He hesitated. I hope so. But not today. Not because of one meal. She nodded slowly. And if this is all it ever is? She asked. Quiet dinners, small talks, no ring, no return. Malric looked at her, steady. Then I'll still show up, because your peace matters more than my pride. She didn't kiss him, didn't invite him to stay, but she walked him to the door, and didn't shut it until he disappeared down the hall. Then leaned against the frame. For the first time in years, her chest didn't feel tight after a goodbye. It felt steady, safe. The next morning, she opened her planner. The Vestra annual review was 6 weeks out. Leadership rotation trials were starting. She paused, then penciled in a name on the final list. Malric Vane. Underneath, she scribbled one word, observe. The Vestra board review was never casual. It wasn't designed for comfort or charm. It was a quiet arena where loyalty, numbers, and vision were dissected under harsh lights and sharper eyes. Elena arrived early, Not to prepare, but to watch. She wanted to see who showed up early, who waited until last minute, who reviewed notes, who laughed too loud, and who asked the right questions. Malric walked in 5 minutes early. No assistant, no entourage, just a laptop, a black pen, and his ID badge, the one Elena had issued 6 months ago. He scanned the room, didn't look for her, just sat in the back row and opened his file. "He's trying," said Leora, her head of development, as she sat beside Elena. "I know. Do you trust him?" Elena didn't answer. Trust wasn't given here. It was tallied, earned, proven, like returns on investments, like dividends, like time. The board started. Presentations moved in sequence. Malric's name wasn't called. He hadn't submitted a pitch, but when the room opened for strategy discussions, he raised his hand. Not first, not last, just confidently, as if he'd thought it through. When they nodded, he stood and said, "You're building from structure. That's good. But you're missing rhythm. Innovation isn't just tools, it's timing, and your teams are out of sync." Silence. Then a few nods. Then Leora smiled faintly. "Continue," the chair said. He spoke for 5 minutes. Clear, specific, grounded. No fluff, no sales pitch, just insight. He sat back down and said nothing else for the rest of the meeting. Afterwards, in the hallway, Elena approached him. "You rehearsed that." He didn't deny it. "I did." "You didn't pitch. Didn't need to. You know my ideas." She paused. "But I needed to see if you knew the company." He held her gaze. "I know you. That's the company." She didn't blink. That line would have worked 5 years ago. He nodded. "Today, it's just the truth. That weekend, Nyla got sick. Not hospital sick, but the kind of toddler flu that clings and whines and turns every surface into a tissue zone. Malric offered to stay. Elena almost said no, then looked at him, holding the thermometer like it was sacred, and said, "Fine." He didn't leave for 2 days. Didn't touch her. Didn't hint. Didn't posture. He watched cartoons with Nyla, made soup, cleaned up tissues, folded blankets, and when Elena finally knocked out on the couch, he placed a pillow under her head and dimmed the lights. That night, something changed. Not in his words, but in the way Nyla whispered "Dada," while half asleep in his arms, and the way he choked back tears quietly so she wouldn't wake. Elena woke up to quiet, a rarity in a house with a toddler and a guest. But the dishes were washed. The fridge was organized. Nyla's shoes were paired neatly by the door. She found Malric asleep on the floor next to the couch, a pillow beneath his head, Nyla's tiny blanket over his chest. She stood still for a moment, not out of affection, out of disbelief. He hadn't asked for credit. He hadn't played the hero. He'd simply shown up and not left. That morning, she brewed coffee and poured 2 cups. When he woke, she handed him one. No words, just the warmth of shared silence. He took it gently, as if he knew the cup was heavier than it looked. Later that afternoon, he asked, "Can I take her to the park?" Elena hesitated. He read her pause like a code. "You can come. I'm not asking to be alone with her. I know. I just want her to see I show up when she smiles too, not just when she's sick." That earned him a half nod. At the park, Nyla ran toward the swings. Malric followed, adjusting the straps, checking the chains. Elena sat on the bench nearby, watching. She wasn't watching her daughter. She was watching him. He wasn't performing. He wasn't looking over his shoulder to see if she noticed. He was just present, pushing, laughing, catching, waiting, patient. After an hour, they sat under the shade. Nyla slept in her lap. Malric sat across from her, sweat on his forehead, dirt on his jeans. "This wasn't your life before," she said. "No," he replied. "You wore silk suits and made billion-dollar calls." He chuckled softly. "Now I catch a banana mid-throw and call it a win." She allowed a smirk. "Do you miss it?" "The suits?" He shrugged. Not really. The power. Sometimes. You had control. No. I had noise. There's a difference. Silence lingered. Then she asked what she'd avoided for 2 years. Why did you fire me the way you did? He looked at her. Not evasively. Not guiltily. Just honestly. I was afraid. Of me. Of what you made me feel. You were real. And real things weren't convenient. That's not an answer. It's the truth. I'd built a life I could leave at will. You made me want to stay. And that scared you. Terrified me. Elena didn't speak. She stood, adjusted Nyla's position, and said, "Fear isn't a license to destroy people. I know. You changed my life." "I broke it," he corrected. She didn't argue, didn't comfort, didn't soften. She just started walking home, expecting him to follow. He did. Quietly, respectfully, and more human than he'd ever been. The tech conference hall in Austin buzzed with flashes, murmurs, and tailored ambition. Founders, venture capitalists, journalists, everyone wanted a quote, a handshake, a selfie. But the main event? Elena Drix, keynote speaker, CEO of Drixnova, former Maid turned mogul. Malric stood behind the curtain, holding Nyla's hand. "Is she nervous?" Nyla whispered. "Not a bit." Malric smiled. "She looks pretty in that dress." "She does. You like her." "I do. Like... He paused, then nodded. "I like her exactly how she deserves." On stage, Elena stepped to the podium. No notes. No prompter. Just presence. She scanned the audience, found Nyla's face, and softened. "My story isn't typical," she began. "I didn't have a business degree or a trust fund. I had floors to mop, linen to fold, and quiet to survive." Some in the crowd shifted. Curious. Intrigued. She continued. "People ask me all the time what flipped the switch. What made me go from invisible to this?" A pause. My answer? Disrespect. A beat. A man once told someone to fire me because I was a distraction, that I wasn't worth remembering. Murmurs. And instead of crumbling, I built. Quietly, strategically. Brick by brick. Applause began to stir. Malric watched. He didn't blink, didn't move, didn't shrink. He stood tall. Not in pride, but in truth. She'd earned this stage. He was just grateful to witness it. Elena finished strong. The best revenge isn't power, it's peace. It's walking into a room they said you'd never reach, and being the one asked to speak. She stepped back. The crowd erupted. People rose. But she didn't bow. She turned and walked off stage. Calm, grounded, elegant. Backstage, Nyla ran to her. Malric stayed behind. He didn't want to crowd the moment. But Elena looked over Nyla's shoulder and said, "You coming?" He stepped forward. Not with pride, but with permission. And that was everything. That evening, the celebration was private. No press, no red carpet. Just a long dinner table set under soft lights in Elena's garden. Nyla chased fireflies between bites of chocolate cake. The board members chatted in small groups. A violinist played something soft, something that didn't ask to be heard, but made everyone feel seen. Malric sat at the edge of the gathering. Elena stood a few seats away, talking with a colleague, laughing once, low and warm. He didn't interrupt, didn't move. He was learning stillness. Elena noticed. She walked toward him with 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "Peace offering," she said. He took one. "Thank you." She sat beside him, not close, but not guarded either. He studied her, not the way he used to, from ego or interest, but the way a man looks at someone he knows he failed once, and doesn't want to again. "I was going to propose to her that week," he said quietly. Elena didn't answer. "I thought I was in control of everything. That love was something I could rearrange, like numbers on a spreadsheet. I thought I could leave messes behind and they'd vanish." She finally looked at him. "And what do you think now?" He turned to her, slower, steadier. "That some messes are meant to teach you not to leave the room next time." Silence. Nyla's laughter rang from the lawn. "You're a better father than I expected," she said. "I had the best coach." She raised an eyebrow. "She's 6, she said. "Exactly." They smiled. A first. Soft. Earned. Not flashy. But real. Later that night, as guests left and dishes were cleared, Malric helped tidy up. Elena handed him a dish towel. "You're not above wiping glass," she teased. He smirked. "I used to think I was above people, and now I'm just trying to show up. For her, for you." Even if the door never fully opens, she paused, watching him dry a wineglass without breaking it. "I don't believe in magic redemptions," she said. "I don't either," he replied. "But I believe people can grow. And growth, when it's quiet and consistent, that's the most trustworthy kind." He nodded. "I'd like to stay in that lane." Elena leaned back on the counter, arms folded. No promises, no titles, no assumptions. "Agreed. Just start where you are. And keep showing up." He offered a hand, not for a shake, not for a deal, just to say, "I understand." She looked at it, then took it. "If this story made you pause, feel, or reflect, we want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated, only to rise far above? Share your story below, or tell us your favorite moment in this one. Was it the chessboard, the Sharpie, or the glass of cider? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Because here on Mr. Charles Stories, quiet revenge, earned respect, and patient love, we'll always have a seat at our table.